"Ma'am, step away from the executive elevator before we remove you from the floor." The sentence hit the lobby like shattered glass at 8:42 on a rainy Thursday morning inside Whitaker Tower in downtown Chicago. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Coffee cups froze halfway to lips. Even the soft piano music drifting through the marble lobby suddenly felt out of place. Derek Lawson stood near the private elevator bank with his arms crossed over a dark navy security jacket, his expression calm in the way powerful people looked when they thought they were untouchable. In front of him stood Naomi Whitaker. Black woman, 44 years old. Dark wool coat. Simple leather tote. No diamonds. No entourage. No attempt to look important. And that, apparently, was the problem. Derek glanced at her again, slow and dismissive, like he had already decided who she was before she opened her mouth. "I said this area is restricted," he repeated louder this time. "Executives only." Naomi didn't move. She stood still beneath the glow of the lobby chandeliers, rainwater still clinging to the shoulders of her coat from the walk-in from the street. Her eyes drifted briefly toward the elevator doors, polished black steel reflecting the tension already spreading through the room. Then back to Derek. Calm, controlled, dangerous in the quietest possible way. "I have a meeting upstairs," she said evenly. Derek gave a short laugh under his breath. "People like you always say that." A few heads turned immediately. Near the reception desk, a young employee named Maya Brooks looked up from her computer screen, confusion flashing across her face. Naomi noticed it. She noticed everything. The tightening jaws. The uncomfortable silence. The businessman pretending not to stare while checking his phone. The older white couple near the espresso station whispering to each other. She had seen rooms shift like this her entire life. Rooms that became colder the second she walked into them. Derek stepped closer. "You can either leave now," he said, "or my team escorts you out." Naomi slowly removed one black glove, folding it carefully into her palm like she had all the time in the world. That calm unsettled him more than shouting ever could have. "Before we continue," the narrator's voice seemed to settle over the moment itself. "Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change, and we're glad you're here." Now, back to Naomi Whitaker. The lobby air tightened again as two additional security officers approached from across the marble floor. Brad Miller, Colton Hayes, both white, both watching Naomi like she already belonged in handcuffs instead of a corporate tower. Maya glanced nervously at her screen again, then back at Naomi. Something wasn't adding up. The access request attached to the executive elevator had flashed green for the woman standing in front of them. Owner-level clearance. She blinked hard, thinking she misread it. Derek never looked at the system twice. He had already made his decision based on the coat, the skin color, and the fact that Naomi had arrived alone. "Last warning," Derek said flatly. "You don't belong up there." Naomi finally looked directly into his eyes. No anger, no fear, just recognition. The kind that comes from surviving moments exactly like this long before the money, the towers, and the power ever arrived. Then she spoke softly enough that only the closest people could hear it. "That sentence," she said, "has destroyed more careers than you realize." Naomi Whitaker had walked into Whitaker Tower alone on purpose. No driver waiting outside. No assistant clearing paths ahead of her. No black SUV parked at the curb with tinted windows and company plates. Just a woman in a charcoal coat carrying a weathered leather tote through the revolving doors of a building that technically carried her name 30 stories high across the glass exterior. The irony would have been funny if it was not so familiar. 3 weeks earlier, an anonymous complaint had landed on her private desk. Then another. Then 6 more. Most were short, quiet, careful. Employees describing executive security officers stopping black consultants in the lobby while white executives passed without question. Delivery workers forced to wait outside in winter rain while others were waved through. One woman wrote that she had cried in the restroom after being asked if she actually worked there. Naomi read every complaint herself at 2 in the morning inside her penthouse office overlooking Lake Michigan. She did not call a public relations team. She did not schedule a meeting. She decided to see it with her own eyes. That was why she stood now beneath the gold glow of the executive elevator with Derek Lawson, watching her like she was a threat instead of the person who signed the checks that funded his entire department. Brad Miller stopped a few feet away, broad shoulders tense beneath his security blazer. Colton Hayes positioned himself near the elevator keypad, as if Naomi might suddenly rush the doors. The choreography of suspicion looked practiced. Too practiced. Naomi noticed the tiny details. Brad keeping one hand near his radio while glancing at her bag. Colton avoiding eye contact entirely. Derek standing slightly ahead of the others because men like Derek always believed authority was a performance first and truth second. Across the lobby, Maya Brooks swallowed hard while staring at the security screen beside her desk. The green clearance notification was still blinking beside Naomi's name. Executive Override Access. Permanent Authorization. Highest level. Maya looked from the monitor to Naomi and back again. Sir, she said carefully toward Derek. There may be some confusion with the system. Derek did not even turn around. There is no confusion, he replied sharply. She does not belong here. Naomi slowly slipped her gloves into her coat pocket. Her face remained unreadable, but inside her mind old memories moved quietly beneath the surface like storms underwater. At 26, she had been stopped outside a venture capital conference in Boston because security assumed she was catering staff. At 31, a receptionist at her own real estate acquisition meeting asked her to wait outside for the actual investors. She remembered every face, every smile, every apology that came too late. None of those people remembered her, but she remembered all of them. That was the thing about humiliation. It branded one person for a moment and another for a lifetime. Derek stepped closer again, lowering his voice as though pretending professionalism could erase the insult underneath it. Ma'am, this is your last opportunity to leave peacefully. Naomi looked past him toward the elevator doors, reflecting the entire scene back at the room like a mirror nobody wanted to face. Then she asked one calm question. How many people have you done this to before me? Derek smirked instantly. Not enough, apparently. The answer landed harder than shouting ever could. Maya's eyes widened. Even Brad shifted uncomfortably beside him. But Derek did not notice. Men convinced of their own righteousness rarely noticed the exact moment the room began turning against them. The silence spreading through the Whitaker Tower lobby no longer felt uncomfortable. It felt charged. Employees entering from the rain slowed near the security desk, pretending to check messages while secretly watching the confrontation unfold beneath the executive elevators. Nobody wanted to stare openly, but nobody could look away either. Derek Lawson stood taller now that people were watching him. Some men mistook public attention for authority. Naomi Whitaker recognized the type immediately. Brad, Derek said without taking his eyes off her. Escort her back toward the main entrance. Brad hesitated for half a second. It was small, almost invisible, but Naomi saw it. So did Maya Brooks behind the reception counter. Brad stepped forward anyway, forcing professionalism into his voice. Ma'am, we just need you to cooperate. Naomi remained still. Cooperate with what exactly? She asked calmly. Being treated like a criminal in my own building? Derek laughed sharply. Your building? He repeated loud enough for nearby employees to hear. That is funny. A few uncomfortable smiles flickered around the lobby before disappearing just as quickly. Nobody wanted to be attached to the wrong side of this moment. Colton Hayes moved beside the elevator keypad and crossed his arms. You know how many people try to bluff their way upstairs every month? He asked. Everybody suddenly claims they know executives. Naomi turned toward him slowly. I do know the executives, she replied. Personally. Colton smirked at Brad as though the answer proved his point. Maya looked back down at her monitor again. Naomi Whitaker, Permanent Executive Access. Founder and Chief Executive Officer. Owner authorization confirmed. The words glowed on the screen in bright green letters while Derek continued speaking to Naomi like she was trespassing. Maya felt her pulse rising. Sir, she tried again carefully. I really think we should verify this with corporate before escalating. Derek finally turned toward her, irritation flashing across his face. Maya, stay in your lane. The words hit harder than he intended. Maya lowered her eyes immediately, but Naomi noticed the embarrassment burning across the young receptionist's face. She had seen talented employees silenced by ego before. Entire companies rotted that way from the inside out. Near the espresso station, a middle-aged black consultant wearing a conference badge watched quietly with his jaw tight. Beside him, A Latina attorney whispered something under her breath while checking the company logo on the wall and then looking back at Naomi. The room was beginning to understand that something was deeply wrong here. Derek sensed it too. That was why his tone became sharper. "Hand me your phone and identification," he demanded. "Now." Naomi blinked slowly. "No." The answer landed like a dropped glass in the center of the lobby. Derek stepped closer. "Excuse me." "You heard me." Naomi's voice never rose above conversation level. That calmness irritated him more with every passing second. People expecting chaos often became unstable when met with composure instead. Brad shifted beside Derek again, clearly uncomfortable now. "Maybe we should call someone upstairs first," he muttered quietly. Derek shot him a look cold enough to silence him instantly. Then Derek pointed toward Naomi's tote bag. "What exactly is in there?" Naomi glanced down briefly at the worn leather bag hanging from her shoulder. "The future of your employment," she answered. A few gasps escaped before people could stop themselves. Even Colton's expression flickered, uncertainly for the first time. But Derek only scoffed louder. "You think threatening security in a corporate tower is smart?" Naomi tilted her head slightly. "No," she said. "I think underestimating me was the mistake." The elevator doors behind her reflected every face in the lobby now. Nervous employees, curious executives, security officers slowly losing control of the room. And standing at the center of all of it was Naomi Whitaker, calm as stone while the entire atmosphere around her began to crack. The lobby doors rotated slowly as more employees stepped in from the Chicago rain. But almost nobody continued toward the elevators anymore. The tension near executive security had become impossible to ignore. Conversations faded into whispers. Phone screens lowered. Coffee cups sat untouched in nervous hands. Whitaker Tower no longer felt like a corporate headquarters. It felt like a courtroom waiting for a verdict. Maya Brooks stared at the glowing monitor in front of her, while Derek Lawson continued standing inches from Naomi Whitaker with the confidence of a man who had never truly been challenged before. The system still displayed the same thing. Naomi Whitaker, founder, chief executive officer, unlimited access authorization. Maya swallowed hard. Her fingers hovered above the keyboard before finally pressing another verification prompt. Green again. No errors. No warnings. No restrictions. Her pulse climbed into her throat. "Derek," she said more firmly this time. "Her credentials are real." Derek did not even look back at her. "No, they are not. I am telling you they cleared at the highest level." That finally made him turn around. Slowly. Irritated. Dangerous in the cold, controlled way insecure men often became when authority slipped from their hands. "Then the system needs to be fixed," he snapped. The sentence spread through the lobby like smoke. Naomi watched Maya carefully. The young receptionist looked trapped between truth and fear. Naomi knew that feeling too well. 20 years earlier, she had once sat silent in a conference room while senior executives mocked another black woman for being too aggressive during a negotiation. Naomi hated herself afterward for saying nothing. Silence protected power far more often than truth did. Across the lobby, a man wearing an information technology badge stepped away from the security office hallway. Ethan Price, 36, thin glasses, tablet in hand. He had clearly been listening for several minutes. "Actually," Ethan said cautiously, "the system is not wrong." Derek's jaw tightened instantly. Ethan walked closer while checking the tablet screen. The badge attached to her profile scanned green 3 separate times. He looked directly at Derek now. Owner-level clearance. The words landed heavily across the marble lobby. Brad looked toward Naomi again, uncertainty growing clearer in his face. Colton shifted beside the elevator panel and muttered something under his breath. Derek, however, doubled down harder instead of retreating. People like him often mistook stubbornness for strength. "Anybody can fake credentials," Derek said sharply. Ethan blinked in disbelief. "Not these credentials." Naomi remained silent while the room slowly changed around her. The atmosphere no longer leaned entirely toward security. Doubt had entered the space now. Dangerous doubt. Near the espresso bar, the black consultant finally spoke up. "Man, this does not look right." A woman beside him nodded immediately. "At all." Derek pointed toward the gathering employees and visitors. "Everybody needs to move along. This is a security matter." But nobody moved. Maya stood up from behind the reception desk for the first time since the confrontation started. Her hands trembled slightly, but her voice came out clear. "I saw her name in the system this morning," she said. "She belongs here." The sentence hung in the air like a crack splitting straight through Derek's control of the room. Naomi looked at Maya quietly, not smiling, just seeing her, really seeing her. Maya felt it immediately. Respect, gratitude, recognition. The kind powerful people rarely offered employees at the bottom of the ladder. Derek scoffed loudly to hide the panic creeping beneath his composure. "You are risking your job over somebody you do not even know." Maya looked toward Naomi again before answering. Softly, "Maybe that is the problem. You never even tried to know who she was." For the first time since Naomi entered Whitaker Tower, the lobby fell completely silent. Even the rain against the glass walls seemed quieter now. Derek Lawson looked around and realized the room was no longer fully his. The air inside Whitaker Tower felt thinner now, stretched tight between truth and denial. Derek Lawson could feel control slipping away from him one stare at a time, and men like Derek rarely handled losing control with grace. His face hardened as more employees slowed near the lobby entrance pretending to check emails while openly listening. Maya Brooks remained standing beside the reception desk, nervous but steady. Ethan Price still held the tablet, showing Naomi Whitaker's verified credentials glowing bright green across the screen. Every second the evidence remained visible made Derek look smaller. So he decided to escalate instead. "Enough," he snapped suddenly. "Brad, move her away from the elevators." Brad hesitated again. "Derek, maybe we should just call upstairs first." "Do your job." The command came sharp and immediate. Brad exhaled once before stepping carefully toward Naomi. "Ma'am," he said quietly, almost apologetically, "please come with us." Naomi did not move. Her eyes remained fixed on Derek instead. "You know this is wrong," she said softly to Brad. That sentence hit him harder than shouting could have. Brad glanced away immediately. Colton stepped forward too now, eager to reclaim authority before the entire situation collapsed around them. "Do not make this harder than it needs to be," he muttered. Naomi looked toward him calmly. "Hard for who?" Then it happened. Brad lightly reached for Naomi's arm to guide her away from the executive elevators. The movement lasted barely a second, respectful by most standards, but the effect inside the lobby was immediate. Maya inhaled sharply. Ethan lowered his tablet slowly. The black consultant near the espresso station stepped forward instinctively before stopping himself. Naomi looked down at Brad's hand resting against the sleeve of her coat, then back up at him. Calm, unblinking. The entire lobby froze. Around that silence. And suddenly Naomi was not standing in Whitaker Tower anymore. For a brief moment her mind pulled backward 20 years to a luxury hotel ballroom in Atlanta. She had been 24 years old, carrying presentation folders into a private investment summit after spending weeks preparing her proposal. A security guard stopped her outside the ballroom doors and asked where the catering staff entrance was. She explained she was there to pitch a development project. The guard laughed and reached for her elbow exactly the same way Brad just had. Gentle enough to avoid headlines. Humiliating enough to leave scars. Naomi remembered standing in that hallway hearing wealthy investors laugh inside the ballroom while she fought tears she refused to let fall. That night, she sat alone in a cheap hotel room, eating vending machine crackers and rewriting her business plan until sunrise. Years later, that rewritten plan became Whitaker Global Holdings. Pain had funded empires before. Derek mistook Naomi's silence for weakness again. "See," he said loudly to the growing crowd. "This is what happens when people refuse to follow policy." Naomi slowly stepped away from Brad's hand. "Policy," she repeated quietly. "That word has hidden a lot of prejudice in this country." Nobody answered her. Nobody could. Because deep down, almost everyone in that lobby understood exactly what she meant. Derek folded his arms tighter. "You are causing a disruption in a private corporate building." Naomi finally looked directly at him again. "No," she said. "I am exposing one." Rain streaked down the massive glass windows behind her while the lobby lights reflected across the marble floor like a stage nobody expected to stand on today. Brad stepped backward now, visibly uncomfortable. Even Colton looked less certain than before. But Derek kept going, digging deeper into the hole pride had opened beneath him. "You should have left when I gave you the chance," he said coldly. Naomi reached slowly into her coat pocket and pulled out her phone. Then she looked at Derek Lawson with the kind of calm that only came from surviving moments exactly like this for decades, and said one sentence that changed the entire atmosphere of the lobby. "No, Derek," she said softly. "I stayed because I wanted to see how far you would go." The moment Naomi Whitaker pulled out her phone, the atmosphere inside Whitaker Tower shifted again. Not loudly, not dramatically, quietly, like the air itself understood something the people in the lobby still did not. Derek Lawson noticed it first. His jaw tightened slightly, even though he forced a smirk onto his face. "What now?" he asked. "Calling somebody to come save you." Naomi unlocked her phone with calm, deliberate movements, while rain rolled down the massive glass walls behind her in silver streaks. "No," she answered softly. "I am calling somebody to document you." The sentence landed harder than Derek expected. Brad looked away immediately. Colton folded his arms tighter, but said nothing. Maya Brooks remained frozen near the reception desk, while Ethan Price slowly lowered his tablet to his side. Naomi selected a number from her contacts and lifted the phone to her ear. She did not rush. She did not shake. It looked less like panic and more like procedure. "Angela," Naomi said the second the line connected. Her voice stayed low, steady, controlled. "Activate executive review protocol." A pause. Then a woman's calm voice answered through the speaker clearly enough for nearby employees to hear. "Confirmed." "Which division?" Naomi's eyes never left Derek Lawson. "Executive security. Begin full audit review immediately. Pull lobby audio, elevator access logs, internal camera footage, employee conduct reports, and all complaints tied to Derek Lawson, Brad Miller, and Colton Hayes." Silence spread across the marble floor like a slow-moving crack in glass. Derek laughed too quickly, too loudly. "You expect us to believe you can launch a corporate investigation with one phone call?" Naomi ignored him completely. "Angela, flag every deleted complaint connected to racial profiling or unauthorized access escalation over the past 24 months. "Already pulling records now," Angela replied instantly. "Would you like legal copied in?" Naomi answered without hesitation. "Yes, and notify Human Resources this review is active effective immediately." Maya's eyes widened. Brad's face lost color little by little with every sentence. Colton glanced toward Derek now instead of Naomi, searching for reassurance that suddenly no longer existed. Derek scoffed again, but the confidence behind it sounded thinner. "This is ridiculous," he snapped. "You cannot just threaten employees because you got embarrassed." Naomi slowly lowered the phone from her ear, but kept the line open. "Embarrassed?" she repeated quietly. "No, Derek. Embarrassment is temporary. This is exposure." Around them, the lobby had completely stopped functioning normally. Employees stood near the entrance pretending to wait for elevators that had already arrived twice without them boarding. A delivery courier near the security desk openly watched now, without even hiding it. Two executives exiting a conference room whispered to each other while staring directly at Derek. The room no longer viewed Naomi as the disruption. The room was beginning to view her as the center of gravity itself. Derek felt it happening. That was why his voice sharpened further. "You think some fake legal call scares me?" Naomi looked at him carefully for a long moment. Then she spoke with the kind of calm that only powerful people truly mastered. "No," she said. "I think the truth should." Angela's voice returned through the phone. "Naomi, I have already located 6 prior complaints involving executive security detaining or removing Black employees and consultants without authorization." The lobby went dead silent again. Maya slowly covered her mouth with one hand. Ethan looked directly at Derek now with visible disbelief. Brad stared at the floor. Colton took a small step backward without realizing he had done it. But Derek still refused to retreat. Pride held him upright, even while the foundation beneath him collapsed inch by inch. "Those complaints mean nothing," he barked. Naomi slipped the phone back into her coat pocket. "That," she said softly, "depends on who owns the building." The question Naomi Whitaker left hanging in the air settled over the lobby like thunder waiting to break. "That depends on who owns the building." Nobody moved. After she said it, nobody even pretended to. The rain against the glass walls seemed louder now, tapping against Whitaker Tower while the entire lobby stood frozen between disbelief and realization. Derek Lawson forced out another laugh, but this time it sounded hollow. You really expect people to believe you own this place? He asked. Naomi studied him quietly for a moment. There was no anger in her face anymore. No frustration. Just disappointment. The kind reserved for people who had every opportunity to do the right thing and chose arrogance instead. No, Derek, she said calmly. I expected you to do your job without humiliating people first. The sentence hit harder than the crowd expected. Maya Brooks lowered her eyes immediately. Ethan Price stared at the floor beside him. Even Brad looked ashamed now. But Derek still refused to stop digging deeper. Pride kept him talking long after wisdom should have told him to stay silent. This is my building to secure, he snapped. And I decide who belongs near those elevators. Naomi nodded once slowly. There it is. Derek frowned. What? Naomi stepped forward just enough for the polished black elevator doors behind her to reflect both of them side by side. You confused access with ownership, she said softly. That is the problem. The lobby stayed silent. Nobody dared interrupt now. Naomi reached into her coat pocket again and pulled out a slim black access card. No logo. No decoration. Just matte black with a silver line across the center. She held it between two fingers for barely a second before tapping it gently against the executive elevator panel beside her. The scanner flashed bright gold instantly. Not green. Gold. A tone echoed softly through the lobby that most employees had never heard before. Executive override authorization. Highest clearance possible. Maya's mouth fell open. Ethan whispered under his breath, "Oh my God." Derek stared at the glowing gold scanner light as the color drained slowly from his face. Naomi looked directly into his eyes. You mocked the chief executive officer of Whitaker Global, she said evenly. In the lobby of Whitaker Tower. The sentence landed like a shockwave. Somewhere near the back of the lobby, somebody gasped out loud. One employee dropped a coffee cup lid onto the marble floor without noticing. Brad took 2 slow steps backward. Colton looked at Derek now instead of Naomi, panic finally replacing confidence in his expression. But Naomi was not finished. You questioned my identity. Her voice stayed calm, sharp, controlled. You ignored verified credentials. You dismissed employees telling you the truth. You put your hands on me near an executive access point. And you did all of it because you decided a black woman dressed simply could not possibly belong here. Derek opened his mouth immediately. That is not what this was. Naomi cut through him without raising her voice. Then explain why every white executive walked through this lobby uninterrupted while you stopped me before I even touched the elevator. Silence answered her. Brutal silence. Because there was no answer that could survive the truth standing in front of them now. Maya looked visibly emotional behind the desk. Ethan rubbed one hand across his forehead like he suddenly understood years of rumors he had ignored inside the company. Brad could not even meet Naomi's eyes anymore. Only Derek kept trying to hold on to authority already slipping through his fingers. You set us up, he muttered weakly. Naomi's expression never changed. No, she replied. I gave you an opportunity. The executive elevator doors behind her opened slowly with a soft mechanical whisper. Golden light spilled across the marble floor while every eye inside the lobby remained locked on Naomi Whitaker, standing at the center of the storm she no longer needed to control because the truth had already done it for her. The executive elevator remained open behind Naomi Whitaker like the building itself had finally chosen a side. Nobody in the lobby spoke for several long seconds after the reveal. Derek Lawson stood frozen beneath the gold scanner light, staring at Naomi as though reality itself had betrayed him. The confidence that once filled his posture had collapsed inward. His shoulders looked smaller now. His voice too. There has to be some misunderstanding, he muttered weakly. Naomi looked at him with the same calm expression she had worn since the moment she entered the lobby. No, she said quietly. The misunderstanding was yours. Her phone buzzed inside her coat pocket. She answered immediately and placed the call on speaker. Angela Reed's voice echoed clearly across the marble lobby. Naomi, the review is complete. Every eye in the room turned toward the phone. Go ahead, Naomi replied. Angela did not hesitate. We recovered multiple deleted complaints tied directly to Derek Lawson and his team. 8 incidents involved black employees, consultants, or guests being denied access without cause. 2 reports were manually altered after internal review requests. Legal has preserved all records. A sharp breath escaped Maya Brooks before she could stop herself. Ethan Price closed his eyes briefly in disbelief. Brad Miller looked physically ill now, while Colton Hayes stared at the floor like he wanted it to swallow him whole. Derek immediately shook his head. That is not true. Angela continued anyway. Additionally, security footage confirms Ms. Whitaker's credentials scanned successfully 3 times before escalation occurred. There was no legitimate security threat. The lobby had become completely silent again. Not uncomfortable silence anymore. Judgment. Naomi slipped one hand into her coat pocket while staring directly at Derek Lawson. You had every opportunity to stop, she said softly. You chose humiliation instead. Derek looked around desperately now, searching the lobby for support that no longer existed. Nobody stepped toward him. Nobody defended him. The same employees who once avoided eye contact now watched him openly. The same room he tried to control had become witness against him instead. Then another sound echoed through the lobby. A series of sharp electronic beeps. Derek looked down immediately at the security badge clipped to his jacket. The access light had turned red. Brad checked his own badge next. Red. Colton too. Red. Angela's voice returned through the speaker. Per executive authorization, all access credentials for Derek Lawson, Brad Miller, and Colton Hayes have been suspended effective. Immediately pending termination review. The words landed like concrete across the marble floor. Derek's face drained completely. You cannot do this over one misunderstanding. Naomi tilted her head slightly. One misunderstanding does not create 8 complaints. Behind the reception desk, Maya slowly sat down as if her legs could no longer hold her upright. Ethan stared at Naomi with a mixture of shock and admiration. Near the entrance, employees whispered openly now. Some looked angry, others embarrassed. A few looked relieved, like they had waited years to see somebody finally confront what everyone quietly knew. Then the executive elevator doors opened wider again, and 3 members of Whitaker Global's corporate legal department stepped out into the lobby wearing dark suits and carrying tablets. The atmosphere shifted instantly. Real authority had arrived. Derek took one slow step backward. Naomi never raised her voice. She never needed to. Remove Derek Lawson, Brad Miller, and Colton Hayes from executive security immediately, she said evenly. Suspend all supervisory personnel connected to the deleted complaints pending investigation. One of the legal officers nodded once. Understood, Ms. Whitaker. Derek looked stunned now. Truly stunned. Like he had just realized power was never volume or intimidation or access to a radio at the front desk. Power was the woman standing calmly in front of him who never once had to yell to dismantle everything he built around himself. Naomi looked around the lobby one final time. At Maya. At Ethan. At the silent employees watching history unfold in real time. Then back at Derek Lawson standing beneath the same executive elevator he once blocked her from reaching. You thought you were protecting this building, she said quietly. But all you really protected was your own prejudice. The lobby of Whitaker Tower no longer looked the way it had 20 minutes earlier. The sharp confidence that once belonged to executive security had dissolved into silence, while the employees who once avoided eye contact now stood openly watching the collapse of a system they had quietly endured for years. Derek Lawson remained near the executive elevator with his deactivated badge hanging uselessly against his jacket. Brad Miller stared toward the marble floor. Colton Hayes looked pale beneath the bright lobby lights. Nobody argued anymore. Nobody threatened Naomi Whitaker now. The truth had stripped all of that away. One of the legal officers stepped toward Derek politely, but firmly. Sir, we need you to come with us. Derek looked at Naomi one last time, disbelief still fighting against reality inside his expression. All of this, he muttered quietly. Because of one interaction? Naomi shook her head slowly. No, Derek. Because of a pattern. The answer settled heavily across the room. Derek lowered his eyes for the first time since the confrontation began. Then he walked away beside corporate legal without another word. Brad followed silently after him. Colton hesitated near the elevator bank before finally removing his security earpiece and placing it carefully on the reception counter beside Maya Brooks. The tiny sound of plastic touching marble somehow felt louder than every argument that came before it. As the former security team disappeared down the hallway, the tension inside the lobby slowly transformed into something else. Relief. Employees exchanged glances that no longer looked afraid. The black consultant near the espresso station exhaled deeply and shook his head. About time, he whispered under his breath. Maya remained seated behind the desk, visibly emotional. Naomi noticed immediately. She walked calmly across the marble floor toward her while the entire lobby watched. Maya stood quickly, nervous again now for an entirely different reason. "Ms. Whitaker, I am so sorry." Naomi stopped in front of her and offered a small calm smile. "For what?" Maya blinked. "I should have spoken up sooner." Naomi looked at her carefully. "You spoke up when it mattered," she said. "That is how change starts." Maya's eyes watered instantly. Ethan Price stepped forward next, still holding the tablet against his chest. "I knew complaints existed," he admitted quietly. "I just did not realize how bad it was." Naomi nodded once. "Most systems survive because good people convince themselves. Silence is temporary." The words hit several employees nearby hard enough that nobody responded immediately. Naomi turned slowly, looking across the lobby that carried her company's name high above downtown Chicago. Rain still rolled down the glass walls outside, but the atmosphere inside felt entirely different now. Lighter. Honest. Like something poisonous had finally been dragged into daylight. The executive elevator doors remained open behind her, glowing softly beneath gold security lights. Naomi glanced toward them before looking back at the employees gathered around the lobby. "I did not come down here today to fire people," she said calmly. "I came down here to see whether this company still remembered what respect looks like." Nobody moved. Nobody interrupted. "Titles do not build culture," Naomi continued softly. "People do. Every greeting, every assumption, every moment someone decides who belongs before they even speak." Maya lowered her eyes again. Ethan nodded slowly beside her. Several employees near the entrance looked visibly ashamed. Naomi slipped her phone back into her coat pocket and adjusted the strap of her leather tote over one shoulder. No celebration. No dramatic victory. Just truth standing quietly in the middle of a corporate lobby. Then she spoke one final sentence before turning toward the executive elevator. "I did not raise my voice today," Naomi Whitaker said calmly. "I raised the standard." The elevator doors closed slowly behind her as the lobby remained completely silent, not because people were afraid anymore, but because every person standing there understood they had just witnessed what real power actually looked like.